you've got that kind of helicopter view that in some of the other teams you just don't get that. But AI is huge, right, in terms of being able to just ask it the question, but of course you've got to feed it all the right information in the first place.
There is a real kind of drive to understand and learn and observe, and I think that's a key trait for someone who wants to progress in GRC.
So we're working a lot on simplifying a lot of the framework, trying to bring that to life across the organisation, and with a lot of focus from the regulators and also our board and our execs, right? They're really, really keen to prevent losses, incidents from happening, etc. We need to be inquisitive, more inquisitive, and the kind of horizon scanning, future thinking is really key.
Welcome to Spotlight on Women in GRC, a podcast series created to continue the conversations sparked by the Women in GRC Awards and carry those insights beyond the events. Backed by key sponsor CoreStream GRC, the series shines a light on the women shaping governance, risk and compliance, exploring their backgrounds, experiences and perspectives on what's changing across the industry. I'm your host, Lucy Montague, and today I'm joined by Sharon. Hello, Sharon.
Hey, Lucy.
How are you?
I am good today. Thank you for inviting me along.
Of course, thank you for coming. This isn't our first conversation, is it, Sharon?
No, it is not. But yeah, we've met on many occasions for different reasons. But no, I love chatting with you, Lucy.
First one-to-one. We've always done a panel, so this should be good. Could you please introduce yourself to our audience and talk a little bit about your current role and a bit about your career journey?
Yeah, so Sharon Sharples, currently work for Barclays, Chief of Staff, Head of Operational Risk Governance and Insights, so global team. I've been at Barclays for 7 years now, doing a variety of roles there, worked in financial services all of my life, and yeah, getting on for 30 years in financial services now. So yeah, done a variety of things, predominantly change management and strategy stuff, but realised as a change manager and a project manager, you're managing risk all the time, which is then what's led me into risk in the latter part of my career, really. So yeah, easy transition for me, but not an obvious one necessarily for everybody else when they think about it.
So when you made that transition into risk, what's kind of kept you in that space and not had you go back into change or projects?
I think risk and operational risk in particular is very it keeps changing, right? So that's why I stayed in change for a long time, because no 2 days were ever the same, and I feel the same about risk and operational risk. There's a lot of focus from the regulators, and also our board and our execs, right? They're really, really keen to prevent losses, incidents from happening, etc. So it's quite a transformative place to be in the bank at the moment. So yeah, and as well as lots of other technical changes that are going on in the world, right? So yeah, it's always changing and always keeping me interested.
And in regards to FS, because this is the world you've only known, what is it that you particularly enjoy about this sector?
I think some of it is because it's easy as a consumer to get your head round. So you understand things because you're a customer, right? You've got a bank account or a mortgage or a loan. So some of that is interesting because you can see it, you understand it, and it resonates. I think also things like when COVID happens, you realise how core that is in the world, right? And you can't exist without some of this stuff. And you also realise how vulnerable some of it is with things like cyber, technology, fraud, all of those hot topics as well that keep us on our toes, I guess, in that sector. So yeah, lots of things to think about.
Really great. If we move into kind of leadership, so you're chief of staff, but from your perspective, women make up roughly 50% of entry-level roles in GRC, yet only 17% become chief risk officers and only 14% chief compliance officers. Why do you think there's that gap when you get to C-suite?
I think there's definitely in certain sectors like risk, very much a feeling that it's a role for people who are perhaps more mathematical, and therefore goes back to kind of education in my mind. So a lot more of that kind of maths, science, physics things which people think risk and risk analytics needs tends to be more male driven subjects, and therefore you see more male people coming through in the grad space and going on. I think what people don't appreciate and understand is the variety of roles across risk and the different types of attributes and skills that you need to work in risk teams. And that is growing, but it takes some time, right, for that momentum to build, for you to see those new people coming up in the early parts of their careers. And then I think it will change over time, but I think just historically it's been seen very much as more of a male driven skill set, and therefore you don't see that necessarily coming through in the C-suite. But we do have a lot of women, and again in operational risk, because we cover lots of different risk categories, you do see a lot more females looking after things like supplier risk and again, roles like mine, where actually it's more around the organisational skills, the communication with the governance and committee content, etc. So yeah, again, people can see people like me and some of my colleagues in those types of roles, then they can see it's something they can aspire to as well.
For you to take that leap into the C-suite as Chief of Staff, what enabled you to do that? Was it your peers encouraging you on, or was it an internal thing where you knew you were ready?
I think it's been a long journey, I guess. I think there was definitely something in myself driving me to kind of go, I know I can do this and I'm capable of more. And you see, again, as I started to see people that were role models around me going, yeah, actually, this is something I should aim for. But notwithstanding, there's absolutely been, peers and a lot of mentors and mentorship that has helped me get there and driven me to be able to be in that position, and sponsorship, right, from people. A lot of the roles that you see as well sometimes just evolve, so it's also being that kind of open to saying yes to things, taking additional accountabilities on in your job, taking on that side of desk project, that then kind of builds up your exposure, your network, and your confidence then in order to take on a bigger role in that accountability, right?
Love that. Good balance between the two.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I don't think you could ever achieve any of those things on your own without peers and, like I said, mentor. I'm a huge advocate of mentors and sponsors. I think it's fundamental for your career, because you should never think you're the only one with the answers, right? There's always a second perspective to things.
Have you personally experienced any barriers or biases in your career, and how did you go about navigating them?
Yeah, quite a few actually, but some of them you don't quite realise at the time. And I was talking to somebody the other day where I was like, I think it got to a point where I was made redundant and then had to kind of start again. But I didn't realise that some of the barriers that I'd had were actually because I was a woman. I just thought it was because I was me, right? And so it's only on reflection that you kind of look back and go, yeah, actually that was because I wasn't a woman, and I was a woman, I didn't fit in with the group of people because I wasn't like them. And I had feedback interviews going, yeah, you benchmarked, but you just don't have it. And it's like, well, what is it, right? And they couldn't articulate that. So absolutely felt that. I felt it being a working mum, right, as well, and trying to juggle stuff, regardless of the fact that I've got a super supportive family and stuff around me. You've still got those barriers and battles with the caring responsibilities or feeling guilty when you're not there doing the caring and somebody else is. So it does hold you back a lot, and taking that time out to be with your children and your family as well sets you back career wise. Again, early on in my career, there were people who were quite open about the fact that they didn't want to hire young women into the team because they were going to get married and go off and have children, right? So yeah, like I said, it's only on reflection that you kind of look back and go, actually, those things they only happened to me because I was female. Things have changed a lot. That was a long time ago, right? And it's great that we've got some more equality in that space in terms of men being able to take longer periods of time to stay at home with the children and all of that kind of stuff, which is like amazing, because going back to when I had my children, would never have thought that was even, you were going to get to kind of some of that parity, although it's, it's not there in every organisation, and it's not quite the same. But again, it's the more you've got those male allies utilising that and demonstrating that they can do it, and actually there is that kind of equality, that you'll start to see some of those barriers being lifted, because people don't see that as a gender thing. It's just a person thing, right? Anybody can go off, take a career break, whether that's for caring or whatever reasons, really.
That's nice to know that we have progressed so far and you can feel that sense of change.
Yeah, it is. I think it's going to be very different for the future generations from that perspective, if people continue to advocate for that, and like I said, the male allyship kind of continues.
If a recent graduate asked you why they should consider a role in GRC, what would you tell them?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, it's an interesting place to be, right? It's ever evolving through the nature of the world evolving. The nature of kind of risk, compliance, governance, like that type of stuff. We're trying to keep people safe, right? Be that a consumer product or, any kind of process or whatever it is that company is doing. So the regulators are all over us. So again, that's constantly kind of giving you change and new aspirations in which to move organisations forward to. I also think it's very broad, right? As I mentioned, you can have multiple careers, I think, in those genres, because you can start in, I don't know, as a cyber person. It doesn't mean you can't evolve and end up working in a different part of risk, or move from risk to compliance, etc. I see that happen quite regularly too. So it's quite transferable in that. And again, kind of first and second line roles, I've seen people move between the two both ways. So yeah, I think it just gives you lots of options. The one thing I do again like about these types of roles is they do sit across the whole bank in my situation, but whatever organisation you're in, that kind of risk compliance, you get that lens of everything that's going on. So you've got that kind of helicopter view that in some of the other teams you just don't get that, and you can sit in your little bubble and be completely ignorant necessarily to some of the other stuff that's going on. So I think it's quite an exciting place to be able to get and see everything going on. Even if you don't continue in those areas, you can see where actually you might want to take your career across an organisation, because you've got that vision that you wouldn't get necessarily in some other like specialist departments.
That is something I've noticed with all the women that I've spoken to on this podcast. Everyone has this innate curiosity. There is a real kind of drive to understand and learn and observe. And I think that's a key trait for someone who wants to progress in GRC.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be open-minded. You've got to be inquisitive and curious about stuff. And you've got to be able to ask some of the hard questions, like challenge why, like, is that kind of just why? But also then kind of go bring the solutions with it, right? So again, a lot of risk stuff, we're trying to fix problems, either the remediation or prevent things from happening, and putting the controls in place around some of that. So yeah, so it's a good place to be if you like doing analytical stuff, if you like fixing things, if you like the variety. Yeah.
So this question I've been really excited to ask you about, because I know you do so much good work at Barclays. How can organisations do a better job of supporting women into leadership roles in GRC and just wider diversity and inclusion initiatives?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely a point about having those role models or allies that are there to mentor and sponsor and support women. Now, it's become harder, I guess, in some organisations to target female development and female promotion. But I think even if you're doing any kind of development programme, that will just naturally, help women. So even if it is inclusive of all genders, like, you absolutely will be developing and bringing those people along on the journey. Those things don't need to cost a lot of money, right? Again, mentorship, sponsorship is just people speaking to people, making a bit of time. knowledge share sessions. It doesn't need a huge amount of investment, so people shouldn't be thinking that they've got to throw money at the problem. Lots of the things that we've done have just been done by other colleagues, sharing knowledge, supporting one another, organising events and activities, networking, and just trying to drive things forward from a colleague perspective. Because again, colleagues have got the right answers, not necessarily your central HR team, right? They're not the people on the floor kind of going, actually, we all need a little bit of education on AI, right? Who do we know who'd be happy to do a bit of a session and bring everybody along on the journey with them? So I think there's definitely that. I think the flexibility is the other piece. So there are still obviously a lot of women carrying the caring burden, whether that's children, elderly, etc. So being more flexible, the hybrid working, hours of working where it can be, I think creates a much better environment for women to be able to flourish and succeed. And we shouldn't forget that as we start to kind of move more towards time in office requirements and things like that. The flexibility brings that about for everybody, but it does help women much more where they are in those situations where they're having to care for others, etc. And I think it's just not forgetting that there isn't equity at the moment, and there is still a long way to go, and treat everybody fairly is so important. For, again, like I said, it goes back to the role model. You need to see people at that level, see that they can do it and how they've managed to do it, and not just because they're. And I remember when I started doing some of the women pieces, a lot of the senior ladies were people who had live-in nannies and that type of support, which most people day to day don't have access to, right? So it's hearing some of the real stories and how people have been able to succeed and manage and cope with some of those things in normal situations, right? So bring some of that to life in terms of the storytelling.
I really like that point, because I think that's something that sometimes gets missed when we think about women in business, women in GRC initiatives, is that socio-economic disparity. And as you say, like caregiving roles, it can look very different for two different types of groups.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I'd listened to these things and I was like, you're a great speaker, you've done amazing, but of course you have, because you've got the money to do that. You've got the money to throw at that. Most people haven't got that, and there's also people who haven't got, even, like I said, I've been fortunate, I've got a lot of family around me that's been supportive, but people haven't got that as well. So I'm like, I don't know how you do it without those things. No money, no family. So again, that's where, like I said, my point around the flexibility becomes super, super important, and making it, again, for everybody. It's not a female thing, but everybody needs some of that in order to be able to succeed. And we don't work, we don't live in a 9-to-5 world anymore either. So you can get the job done when you get it done, unless you've got like a regulatory deadline or something. Most things are a little bit more fluid, right?
Yeah, very nice. Sharon, can you please share a moment where you felt particularly proud or empowered in your career?
Yeah, there's been quite a few. I think the biggest one for me was a story I often tell. So I dropped out of university when I left school, went to uni, thought that was what I should do. Really had picked the wrong subjects, all of that kind of stuff. So felt like a huge failure starting my career, and started, at the bottom of the food chain. 6 years ago, I graduated with a first distinction in my master's, right? And I'd done that being a working mum with a full-time career and stuff. So that moment kind of made me go, actually, I am capable of this. If I'd have chosen perhaps the right path at the beginning, I might have found it a bit more successful at that point in time. But it was a piece that made me kind of go, no, I am capable and deserving of this accreditation, basically, in terms of being able to achieve a master's, having felt really like a bit of a failure and someone who wasn't academic enough at that point in time, right? So yeah, so that one again, and also shows what you can do while working with just a lot of business knowledge and experience, that you've got capabilities that you don't even realize because like I said, when you've come through the education system, it hasn't necessarily benefited you or been the right path at that point in time, but it is something that you can go back to.
I love that. So it's fueling your self-confidence by getting those additional learnings in a way that makes sense for you.
Yeah, that's right. And at a time that was right for you, right? It's not always about following that straight line of, you leave school, you go to uni, you get a job, you get married, you know what I mean? It's like there isn't a set path for people. And we shouldn't, and I'm very keen not holding my kids to that kind of like, you've got to do this in this particular order. Like do it when it feels right. Don't go with the flow and copy everybody else, which again is easy to do, to kind of go, well, they're doing that, I'm going to go and do that too. So do what's right for you as an individual, right? And then you will be hopefully successful because it's at the right time and doing the right things and stuff.
What did you do your master's in?
So it was business administration. So I wrote mine about change and strategy, funnily enough. So so my dissertation was all focused around change and strategy in financial services.
And
quite predictable, but again, play to your strengths. It's a huge advantage, right? Know what you're good at and leverage that.
Yeah, and enhance where you're currently working. That's perfect. In regards to time management, because I've always been so curious at this, I've seen your CV and your LinkedIn profile, and you just do so much extra alongside your very important, very big job. How do you go about managing that? How does your day-to-day work?
Again, a lot of support from my family. There is that. I think, again, a piece of advice I give to a lot of people is pick stuff that you care about. So if you are going to do extracurricular activities, like something you're passionate about, you will make time for. If you care, you'll want to do it and you'll free up the time. So it used to be a chair of governors, school governors, but my kids were at that school at that time, right? And so I cared about the outcomes at that school. I cared about what was going on there, and I, spent my evenings and some of my time. Been fortunate, my employers give like 2 days volunteering days, so again, been able to utilize those as well to my advantage when I've been doing some of those activities. And selfishly probably got involved in the women agenda at Barclays when I joined Barclays because I wanted to find some friends. But again, started to realise actually I cared about that, and the female agenda is particularly interesting because it's so intersectional. So we talk about socioeconomic, you talk about disability, you talk about, ethnicity, like those lenses on the female agenda, you're like, yeah, actually. So then it becomes quite powerful because you realise that your impact can be quite broad and far-reaching, and then that just drives you to do more when you get success from things. It's like a bit of a snowball, and keeps me going really. And I just love helping other people. And again, I didn't realise that until I started to do some of this stuff. I was like, oh, actually, I do like helping other people rather than, it's about me, because I've kind of done some of that stuff. I've achieved a lot of what I want to achieve. So now let's help a load of other people do that. So
I can feel the passion through the screen, Sharon. So much. What are you and your team most focused on right now? Is there a trend, a regulation, or emerging technology people should be aware of?
Yeah, so we're working a lot on simplifying a lot of the framework, trying to bring that to life across the organisation in ways that people can understand it better and apply it in their day job, not just thinking it's about more control and kind of business prevention type stuff. So looking at simplifying all of that and then using the technologies to do that. So we're implementing a new GRC tool. We are looking at AI usage and agents, etc., and how that can help us and the colleagues across the whole bank understand and apply some of what we need them to protect consumers, colleagues, funds, whatever we're trying to do at any particular time. So our focus is really on we've got a lot of regulation, we've got a lot of things we're trying to do, but how do you get that information out to everybody? Like, not one person can hold all the pieces of information, but AI is huge, right, in terms of being able to just ask it the question, but of course you've got to feed it all the right information in the first place and stuff as well. So yeah, lots going on around that from an op risk perspective, and still a lot of regulator scrutiny over everything that we do, rightly so, but also feels quite it holds you back a little bit from a transformation perspective, right?
That balance is, as you've spoken about before. Looking ahead, what do you think will define the next era of governance, risk and compliance, and how should leaders prepare for it?
I think it goes back to what you were saying earlier about we need to be more inquisitive, and the kind of horizon scanning, future thinking is really key. And I think that's where, again, by simplifying the day to day, we can focus more on the what ifs. So the things that we, again, thought wouldn't happen start to happen, right? The fact that there is conflict probably somewhere in the world all of the time, the complexity of the supplier networks that we've all got and we heavily rely upon to deliver things for the bank and the customers, etc. It's just being able to, again, think about everything that might go on, all of the different things that we need to tackle, and again, how best to do that, what the sequencing is, etc., and then how you simplify stuff for customers at the same time, because you don't want all the friction in the customer journeys and the processes. Their expectation is this kind of easy access to, buy products, do stuff. But of course, risk tends to go, right, we've got to control that, and we've got to put a stop in that process, and someone's got to do, a credit check. Or so how, again, do you move things forward while we're in this world that's quite volatile, right?
Yes, that uncertainty. I went to an AI FS-led event recently, and they were talking about the fact that there's not that much regulation in the UK specifically around AI, but then you've got the SMCR and the accountability for individuals, and it's as you say, it's that balance and that friction between empowerment and enablement versus we've got to make sure we're careful here, guys.
Yeah, that's it. And of course, but we want to explore all of those things, but in a safe way. But again, customers are like, well, surely this is easy, right? I can ask ChatGPT to give me the answer to that. So why can't you tell me that, Barclays? It's consumer expectation versus our ability to keep up to date with some of that, and keep the bank safe, right? And the safe thing is super, super important with cyber crime, with again, like your deep fakes and your all the different risks that AI brings into the organization as well. So
moving into influence, first question, what career advice have you been given that's always stuck with you?
Oh dear. There was there's one that stuck with me, which was really around stakeholder management, and it was really around treating people with respect, even if you're getting very frustrated with them. It's very much, you don't know when you're next going to need that person and come across them. So it was quite early on, and I guess I was young and kind of vibrant and wanted to kind of make my mark, but it's like falling out with people isn't going to get you where you need to get to. So you have to remember that those stakeholders, whether is that person, it's such a small world, right? You might need them at some point in the future. So yeah, manage your stakeholders kind of carefully and treat them with respect, really, even if you disagree or you don't get along, really. So yeah, that's one that one of my early managers told me. It's that, it's hard, you're excited and feel confident, and then you kind of forget that actually you can't achieve anything without having everybody working with you.
Yeah. And you go home and you vent about it, but then you come back into work and you're fine.
Oh, absolutely. And we're all trying to get the right outcomes and the same things, and I think it's trying to remember that as much as it feels like you're conflicting sometimes in a work environment because you've got different positions that you're trying to defend, or you're trying to get your priorities above somebody else's. At the end of the day, like, we are all trying to do the same thing and get the same outcome for the bank, and it is also just work at the end of the day. So do just go home and forget about it, really. You might have a bit of a rant about whoever it was that wound you up that day, but yeah, get back into it the next day and be friends still, right?
Love that. How has your career shaped who you are outside of work?
I am the organised one. I am the social secretary. So yeah, I fell into project management. So I started in a call centre environment and started to get involved in projects like testing new tech and doing some rollout training and all that kind of stuff. So fell into projects and realised I'm an amazing project manager. But I didn't even know it was a job. When I started work, it was like, what is a project manager? So I project manage everything in my life, and everybody else's lives. So yeah, I'm very organised, structured, can, kind of think about things that might happen and we need to think about. And so yeah, so that just blends into my life and how organised and controlling, as my family would probably say, I am around stuff. But it makes me good for parties, holiday bookings, all of those kind of social events as well, which everyone's like, yeah, get Sharon on that. She'll do the research, she'll make it happen. So yeah, it does blend into your real life as well.
I can attest to this as well, because even the panels, you're the first one to come back. I'm like, yes, Sharon's on it, and it gets everyone else moving. It's very handy.
Yeah, and again, like, being that person who's passionate and driven, like, is just good, and it's a nice, like I said, inspiration for others to kind of get motivated and go, you know what, actually, I can do this too. So yeah, just takes other people a little bit more. I'm quite decisive as well, though, so it's like, if I decide I'm going to do something, it just happens. So
very good. And then last question here, are there any books, podcasts, or people who have had a meaningful impact on your career that you would like to recommend to others?
Oh wow. You see, I'm not a podcast listener too, but there's a couple of people recently, I guess. So Eleanor Mills, I've spent the last few years working with her, and oh man, and now the name's lost me. Lindsay Simpson, right? So I've been working with both of them more around women in the later parts of their life, and the fact that both of them look at kind of over 50 females, and that actually your career isn't over, and sometimes actually it can be starting at that point, because that's when you've got some of the freedom. So yeah, please look up those two ladies who are doing amazing things for the older generations, really focusing around the fact that some of us are going to live to 100, right? So whereas people were looking to retire in their 50s before, people are thinking about stuff very, very differently, and also have a lot of value to add still to organizations, society, etc., etc. So yeah, those two are the two that are kind of inspiring me at the moment, and I love working with them and promoting their stuff. So
and is it they've written a book, or are they on a podcast?
I think they've both definitely written books.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't think they have their own podcast, but they are very much involved in other people's podcasts. So you'll see them all over LinkedIn and stuff as well. So Lindsay's book is new, called The Age Rebellion, and let me just look behind me. Eleanor's is called Much More to Come, which was, I think, released about 18 months ago. So yeah, both of those are very good for those ladies who are thinking about, what do we do? And one of the things from Eleanor that she taught me is, like, if you were told that you had like an extra 10% to write, and when you were writing a book, would you write 10% extra at the end? You wouldn't, right? You'd add it all the way through. You'd add an extra 10% all the way through. So why wouldn't you do the same with your life? So yeah, so it's that kind of thinking and impact that different mentality to work, and how long we're going to work for, and what we do with our time on earth, that kind of drives me as well at the moment. So yeah, it's that kind of, what else do I want to do? Because yeah, life's not, over when you hit 50.
It's just getting started.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I've really enjoyed this. I feel very motivated. I feel like I could go out and achieve anything now.
And I think that is, one of the things I like to try and make people feel like you are very capable. If you want to do something, like most things are achievable, it just might be quite difficult, but get the right people around you and the support and stuff, you can move mountains.
Oh, thank you so much.
That's all
Thank
right.
you, Sharon, for joining us. And
No,
thank
you. I love talking to you, Lucy. It's nice to kind of share
We
some
need
of
to
that.
make this a regular thing. I feel like every quarter there's so much change that happens in GRC. There's always new things to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I enjoy talking to other people and understanding what's going on with everybody else as well, and sharing. Again, most of this isn't a competition, right? We can share the things we're doing and the activities and initiatives, right? It's for sharing. It's not for keeping to yourself. They're not your own ideas, because I'm sure somebody's done it before you as well.
Exactly. Thank you all to those listening, and we hope to see you next week on the next episode of the Spotlight on Women in GRC. Until then, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.